The smell of grilled ribs and sun-warmed cider floated through the air as kids ran through the backyard, shrieking with summer joy. I was mid-sentence with Derek's aunt when it happened. "Babe," Derek called from across the patio, holding up a pair of tongs like a trophy. "Your leg buzzing over there. Or are we good, robot wife?" The laughter came in waves. His brothers cackled. One even clapped him on the back. Someone added, "Careful, she might Bluetooth into your bank account next." I smiled. Not a twitch too wide, not a flinch too small. My expression practiced, polished, exactly what was expected from a woman who'd grown accustomed to being the punchline. Inside, though, something shifted. This wasn't the first time Derek had used my prosthetic leg for comedic mileage. It started as awkward jokes during dinner with friends. Then came the comments in bed, his hand tapping the carbon fiber like it was an appliance he didn't order. 3 years ago, it had been a miracle I could walk again. Now, apparently, it was just a glitch to mock. I excused myself from the conversation and walked slowly toward the cooler, letting my weight shift just enough to feel the way my prosthetic absorbed the gravel path beneath me. The soft click of metal against stone grounded me more than any apology ever had. Derek had always liked being the funny guy, the charming one, but lately, his humor came with an edge sharp enough to leave scars, just never visible ones. Later that evening, as he laughed with his friends under string lights, I sat quietly near the fire pit, pretending to sip from my wine. My leg ached from standing too long on uneven grass. Derek looked over at me, raised his glass in mock cheers. "Hey, don't power down yet. Party's not over, babe." I smiled again, tight, controlled, and made a note in the back of my mind. Let him laugh, let them all laugh, because I'd already started planning the moment when none of them would be laughing anymore. 3 years ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with a tube in my throat, a leg I couldn't feel, and a husband gripping my hand like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. A driver had run a red light on 5th and Monroe. I was on my morning jog, training for a half marathon. The impact shattered my femur, crushed everything below the knee. The doctors saved what they could, but in the end, what they couldn't save was gone. Amputation, they called it. Reconstruction, they offered. Reinvention, I chose. The early days were brutal. Hours of physical therapy, phantom pain that struck like lightning, and the quiet horror of seeing myself in the mirror and not recognizing the woman staring back. Derek was supportive in the beginning. He made jokes to lighten the mood, pushed my wheelchair through hospital hallways like we were racing, told me I was strong, that he was proud of me. I believed him, at first. But as the months wore on and I grew stronger, something in him shifted. The first time he flinched was subtle, barely there. I had taken my prosthetic off for the night, the skin on my residual limb raw from a long day. He walked into the bathroom, saw it resting beside the sink, and blinked a little too long. "That thing still creeps me out," he muttered, laughing like it was harmless. I told myself not to make it a big deal. Then came more jokes. "You beep going through airport security again? Want me to get the WD-40? My very own Iron Woman." He said it with a smile, but smiles can be sharp too. Sometimes it wasn't jokes. It was silence. The kind that lingered too long when I walked into a room. The kind that filled the car after a therapy session when I told him I felt less. "You're not less," he said once, eyes on the road. "You're just different now." Different. Not broken, not ruined, just altered enough that the man I married no longer knew what to do with me. He thought I didn't notice, but I saw it all. And I remembered, because what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was already preparing for the day I wouldn't need his hand to hold anymore. Not ever again. The first time he hid my charger, I thought it was a mistake. "I swear I saw it by the nightstand," Derek said, digging through drawers with theatrical frustration. I eventually found it tucked behind the laundry basket in the closet, unplugged. Accidents happen, I told myself. Maybe I moved it without thinking. But then it happened again and again. He started calling it your bionic battery, like it was some nuisance gadget I insisted on dragging around. I'd find it unplugged just before big days, presentations, client meetings, early morning flights, coincidences that always left me a step slower, a little more anxious. When I finally confronted him, his response was a shrug. Maybe you should keep better track of your robot parts. That became his favorite phrase, robot, cyborg, half human. He'd say it with a smile, but the words stung like open wires, especially when he was drinking. Derek never got violent, not in the way people imagine. His cruelty was more elegant than that, wrapped in humor laced with plausible deniability. "You know I'm kidding," he'd say, beer in hand. "You're too sensitive." It wasn't just the comments. He started imitating my limp at parties, around friends, even once in front of my parents, dragging one foot behind him dramatically as he fetched a drink. Someone laughed. I didn't. But no one ever said anything. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they didn't want to. It's amazing what people will ignore when the packaging looks like a happy marriage. We threw dinner parties, sent out holiday cards, took curated vacation selfies, all while I slowly disappeared inside the frame. At night, I'd lie awake and feel the absence where my leg used to be. Not the physical loss, but the emotional one. The space where compassion used to live, replaced by something colder. Indifference. Derek called it adjusting. I called it erasure. And yet I stayed, smiled, smoothed the edges for him. Told myself I was too strong to let words break me. But strength doesn't mean enduring cruelty. Sometimes it means seeing it for exactly what it is. And slowly, quietly, I was starting to see it all. The rooftop was strung with Edison bulbs, casting a soft glow over the polished concrete and catered hors d'oeuvres. It was my moment, a milestone presentation for our firm's newest campaign, months in the making. I stood in front of a crowd of clients, executives, and media partners, laser pointer in hand, confident, steady despite the heat of the spotlight. Then came his voice. "Make sure the Wi-Fi's strong. Her leg needs a signal to function." Laughter, confused at first, then louder. Derek stood near the open bar, holding court with two co-workers. He raised his glass in a mock toast, clearly proud of himself. My hand didn't tremble. My voice didn't waver. I smiled perfectly and kept going, clicking to the next slide as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was done. Later, as I shook hands and accepted congratulations, I caught Derek watching me. He mouthed something. Just a joke, as if that erased it. On the car ride home, he tried to explain. "Lighten up, they loved it. You're always so serious." I stared out the window, silent, cataloging every syllable. Every breath he didn't deserve. He'd humiliated me in front of clients, in front of my team, in front of the people who respected me. And he'd done it with a smile. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I simply got out of the car, took off my heels, and walked upstairs without looking back. By morning, I'd already created a new folder on my private hard drive. I named it Plan B. Inside, I saved screenshots, bank statements, photos of the charger behind the hamper, voice memos, a new password-protected spreadsheet labeled Asset Separation. He thought I'd shut down, retreat, reboot. What he didn't realize was that every time he tried to make me smaller, he was powering up something far more dangerous than his cartoon idea of a robot wife. I wasn't shutting down, I was rebooting. And this time, I was rewriting the code. I didn't explode, I evolved. The day after the rooftop event, while Derek slept off his third whiskey sour, I opened a fresh notebook, one I kept hidden in the false bottom of my wardrobe drawer, and began to document. Date, time, words used, setting, tone, witnesses. I took screenshots of texts, started using voice memos when his comments came slurred and careless after dinner. I jotted down subtle reactions from others, co-workers who winced, friends who awkwardly laughed and changed the subject. I even made a list of times he lost my prosthetic charger and where I later found it. There were 8. Everything had a pattern, and patterns could be proven. 2 weeks later, I quietly met with a lawyer, Eleanor Sharp, a woman with steel in her voice and fire behind her reading glasses. "You've already done half my job," she said after skimming my notes. She explained how disability-based verbal abuse could be grounds for misconduct in divorce court, how his behavior, mockery, tampering with medical equipment, emotional manipulation, wasn't just immoral, it was legally significant. We talked about asset separation, marital accounts, and the value of evidence in the digital age. "Build your file," she said, "then build your exit." I nodded, already ahead of her. I opened a second bank account in my name only, moved my consulting bonuses there slowly in amounts too small to raise questions, canceled the joint Amazon account, ordered a second charger, shipped to my office. Derek noticed none of it. He was too busy being the life of every room, too sure I'd never leave. The thing about slow exits? No one hears the door until it clicks shut. I didn't stop wearing my ring, didn't change my tone at dinner, didn't skip the gym or our weekend brunches. But I stopped belonging to the life I was in and started preparing for the one I was about to build on my own. It started with a declined transaction. My card at the grocery store, $87.16. Declined. Embarrassed, I paid with my personal account and went home to check our finances. The joint account had been bleeding money. Fitness supplements, spa visits, Uber rides during times Derek claimed to be working late. I pulled up the statements. One charge caught my eye. Zen Form Studio, couples membership. We didn't have a couples membership anywhere. A few clicks, a little digging, and there she was, Lexi Ray, a trainer/influencer at Zen Form, blonde, sculpted, probably 26. Her Instagram was a shrine to abs, affirmation quotes, and filtered smoothies. She tagged him in a post, "Power couple goals muscles heart." I stared at my screen, numb, then scrolled. There they were, matching workout gear, his hand low on her waist. Her caption read, "So proud of my man. Strong in the gym, stronger in character." I almost laughed. Derek had always preached about real beauty, yet here he was, chasing an airbrushed cliché, wrapped in spandex and validation. A message from him pinged in as if on cue. "Running late again. Don't wait for dinner. Love you." Love you. My hand hovered over the keyboard before I set the phone down. I knew what I had to do. I printed everything. Statements, screenshots, her posts. I added a new tab to the spreadsheet labeled Affair Financial Impact. Ironically, the man who mocked my leg for being artificial was now infatuated with a woman sculpted by surgeries and filters. He called her the real thing once, on a voicemail he didn't know I'd heard. A real woman, he said. And yet, the realest woman he'd ever known was sitting in his house, building the case that would dismantle his fantasy, one piece of documentation at a time. He thought he'd found perfection. What he didn't know was that I'd found clarity, and clarity was far more dangerous. The first change was small, a new blazer in a deep emerald green. It fit like confidence. Then came the shoes, the haircut, a subtle shift in my walk, not from the prosthetic, but from the woman who wore it now with intention, not apology. I started running again. Not far, not fast, just the first stretch of road near our neighborhood. Early mornings before Derek woke. My blade leg cut through silence like a whisper of freedom. Each step was a refusal to be reduced. "You're really going out like that?" Derek muttered once, watching me lace up. "Not worried about scaring the neighbors with your robo-leg?" I smiled. "Only the ones who underestimate me." He laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. I joined a support group for amputee women, half therapy, half badass sisterhood. Our stories weren't about what we'd lost, but how we'd adapted, rebuilt, thrived. Some wore skirts without covering their prosthetics. One woman had hers custom painted with koi fish and flames. Another had run a triathlon. They didn't pity me. They saw me. And that changed everything. Therapy helped too. My therapist didn't try to fix me. She listened, named what Derek did out loud. Emotional manipulation, targeted cruelty, erosion by inches. She called it abuse. Hearing the word made something settle inside me, like a stone finally placed where it belonged. Quietly, I updated my resume, started interviewing under a different last name, wore the green blazer to every meeting. I knew my worth. I'd just been trained to downplay it. Derek noticed the changes, the confidence, the wardrobe, the laughter that didn't include him. "You've been weird lately," he said one night. "Don't go getting ideas just because you upgraded your wardrobe." I kissed him on the cheek, set the dinner table, and served his favorite wine. Let him think I was dressing for him. He had no idea I was dressing for my own future. I'd always been the organized one in our marriage, the budgeter, the planner. Derek called it my spreadsheet obsession, his cute way of dismissing the systems that kept our lives from unraveling. Now those spreadsheets were my weapon. Every deposit, every unexplained withdrawal, every receipt with Lexi Ray's name on it, I tracked it all. I moved the remainder of my salary into my personal account and rerouted upcoming bonuses. He never noticed. He was too busy bragging about his gains in crypto and leading man energy. Meanwhile, I registered ELM Strategies, LLC, a consulting firm in my name only, quietly, strategically. My first client was a referral from an old colleague, someone who remembered my pitch decks, not Derek's punchlines. We met at a cafe downtown. She never once looked at my leg, only at my ideas. "I want someone who actually listens," she said. "You don't try to bulldoze the room." Derek had once told me I wasn't dominant enough to lead. He said soft skills didn't win clients, but soft could be sharp when you knew how to use it. My client signed a 6-month contract on the spot. I reinvested every dollar. Branding, legal protections, a new laptop. I even booked a brand photographer for the website. No more hiding behind Derek's shadow. I also hired a private investigator. I told myself it wasn't revenge. It was verification. I needed evidence of the affair, proof of intent. Any court would want it, and my lawyer had already started building the strategy around it. "You're playing this smart," Eleanor said. "Clean, documented, no drama. That's how you win." I began compiling a list of people who'd seen Derek's behavior, friends who'd heard the comments, co-workers who'd witnessed the rooftop joke, my therapist. All of them were willing to speak. People underestimate quiet women. They think silence means submission, but silence can be strategy. And I had learned to weaponize mine. He still made jokes at dinner, still called me his bionic queen like it was a term of endearment. I laughed with him, clinked wine glasses, all while the LLC paperwork was framed above my new desk, and my investigator's latest report sat quietly in my inbox. Subject line, confirmation. It started with his hand on my thigh. We were watching some forgettable show, his whiskey glass half empty, his ego full. I'd felt him watching me all evening, measured glances, the kind he used when he thought affection could fix what disrespect had cracked. "You've been distant lately," he said, voice low. I didn't respond. He leaned in, lips brushing my shoulder. "Let's fix that." I moved his hand, gently, calmly. "No." He blinked like I'd spoken in another language. "No?" I nodded. "I'm tired." His jaw tensed. Tired or uninterested? I looked at him then. Really looked. The man who used to carry me through the hospital parking lot now couldn't tolerate a simple boundary. "You've been cold for months," he snapped, rising to his feet. "You know that. Cold like a machine, like your damn leg." The words landed with precision. Half a woman, emotionally disabled. That what therapy taught you to be? His voice was rising now, ugly, slurred at the edges. You think you're too good for me? Just because you've got your little spreadsheets and your fake confidence? I reached for my phone, hit record. He didn't notice. He was pacing now, ranting about how ungrateful I was, how I should be thankful someone still wanted me, how other men wouldn't tolerate a patchwork wife. I let him talk. 5 minutes, 11 insults, 3 slurred slurs about my body and brain. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just listened. When he stormed upstairs, I uploaded the audio file to the cloud, renamed it Verbal 10:44 p.m. Then I emailed it to Eleanor with a single sentence, adding to the file. The man I married was long gone. In his place stood a small, scared boy in an aging man's skin, lashing out at the woman he could no longer control. He thought he'd humiliated me. What he didn't know was that humiliation had already become documentation. I filed on a Thursday. No tears, no theatrics, just a notary's stamp and Eleanor's firm voice. It's done. The next morning, I woke up early, ran 2 miles on the trail behind our neighborhood, and brewed my coffee like it was any other day. Derek was out of town, at a wellness weekend with Lexi Ray. I knew the hotel. I knew the suite number. I knew the check-in name he used. He'd been meticulous about hiding his tracks. Just not meticulous enough. Eleanor had arranged the service to be poetic. At exactly 9 a.m., while Derek was mid-massage and Lexi was live on Instagram doing squats in the background, a woman in a tailored suit walked into the spa lounge and said, "Mr. Weston, you've been served." The paperwork landed in his lap like a bomb. I got the video later from a friend who followed Lexi online. The live stream caught the exact moment the smile fell off Derek's face. He froze, blinked at the envelope, and then looked off camera, stunned. He called 4 times. I didn't answer. He texted, "What is this? You can't be serious. Let's talk before this gets stupid." I forwarded every message to Eleanor. Then I blocked his number. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on jazz, and sat in the quiet of my own peace. He'd spent months preparing for a future without me, siphoning funds, rehearsing excuses, playing house with someone who didn't know the difference between charm and manipulation. What he hadn't prepared for was me stepping away without warning, without drama, without mercy. He once said, I was half a woman. Now he was about to learn what a whole woman fully awake and unafraid could do. By the time Derek got back from his wellness weekend, his accounts were frozen. Eleanor had filed the emergency injunction that morning, citing spousal misconduct, financial tampering, and emotional abuse. With the evidence I'd gathered, the texts, the bank transfers, the recordings, it wasn't hard to convince the judge. The freeze hit every account with both our names, and several he'd tried to quietly stash funds into. His card was declined at checkout. He called Lexi. She didn't answer. By nightfall, she'd removed all trace of him from her Instagram. Photos gone, captions deleted. A vague story post appeared. Energy doesn't lie. Watch how people treat you when they think you need them. She dumped him via text. A week later, mutual friends started reaching out, but not to take sides, to apologize. I never knew it was that bad, one said after I sent her a single recording, the one where he called me emotionally disabled. I thought you were just private, another admitted. Didn't realize you were surviving him. Word spread, quietly but consistently. No loud declarations, just the slow pulling away of people who once laughed at his jokes and now couldn't look him in the eye. Derek tried damage control, claimed I was bitter, claimed I was making things up. Then Eleanor filed a motion to use his voice recordings in the divorce proceedings. 8 separate clips, 8 different versions of the same man, mocking, belittling, unraveling. The judge reviewed the materials and ordered an accelerated hearing. This documentation, he said, flipping through pages of Derek's own words, is not only credible, it is damning. We sat across from each other in the courtroom. He wore the same tailored suit he used to brag about. But his eyes, those were different now. Not angry, not smug, rattled. He once said I was too soft to play the long game. Turns out, softness can carve stone when it's focused enough, and I'd been sharpening my edge for months. The invitation came via email with a subject line that simply read, "Keynote Opportunity, Women in Leadership Summit." I read it twice. They'd seen my interview in a business journal, a quiet profile piece about my consulting work and how I built a firm out of ashes. It didn't mention Derek. It didn't have to. The story resonated. By the time I stepped on stage at the summit, the article had been shared thousands of times. People whispered in the audience, wondering which ex had called me half-human, which man had underestimated the woman now holding a microphone with calm authority. "My name is Elena Weston," I began. "And resilience is not just about survival, it's about strategy." I spoke for 20 minutes about rebuilding, about reclaiming worth, about keeping receipts, both emotional and literal. I ended with a line that would later be quoted across social media. "The thing about being underestimated is, it makes your comeback louder." Afterward, attendees lined up to talk. Women hugged me. Young professionals asked for advice. One executive offered to bring me in as a leadership consultant. Another handed me a book deal proposal. I smiled, gracious and grounded. Meanwhile, Derek's world was quietly collapsing. His employer had caught wind of the recordings. Someone from HR had seen the article. They couldn't prove anything, but enough whispers can sink a ship. An internal investigation was launched. Apparently, Lexi wasn't the only woman he'd made uncomfortable. A former assistant had already filed a quiet complaint. 2 more followed when they saw the story online. Derek called me. From a new number. "You ruined me," he said on the voicemail. "This is vindictive." I didn't respond. I forwarded the voicemail to Eleanor. Then I put on a tailored suit, walked into a downtown skyscraper, and signed a 6-month consulting deal worth more than Derek had made in the last 2 years. He used to call me cold, but the thing about fire is, before it burns, it simmers. And I had simmered long enough. The final hearing was short, not because there wasn't enough to say, there was plenty, but because the evidence spoke louder than either of us ever could. Derek showed up in a muted gray suit that no longer fit quite right. He avoided my gaze, shifting in his seat as Eleanor presented our closing arguments. The financial records, the abusive recordings, the documentation of his affair, his defense, a tepid claim of emotional miscommunication. The judge didn't buy it. In cases of repeated verbal degradation, asset manipulation, and deliberate humiliation, he said, the court has no choice but to recognize the pattern. I kept my face calm as he continued. Elena retains full ownership of the home, the car, the business. Derek is to pay monthly spousal support for the next 5 years and a lump sum restitution for unauthorized use of marital funds. He flinched at the number. I didn't. Outside the courthouse, he finally looked at me. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said, voice calm. "I always was." He scoffed. "Enjoy your basic little car." I smiled. I did, for years. He looked confused. That was fine. Let him stay confused. The real satisfaction wasn't in what I kept, but in what I no longer carried. As he walked off, his posture slumped under the weight of consequences. I stood tall on the courthouse steps, not because I'd won, but because I'd walked away with everything he thought I couldn't live without and never looked back. 6 months later, I was on the cover of Elevate, a regional business magazine. The headline read, "Power Reclaimed, How Elena Weston Turned Survival into Strategy." The article focused on the firm I'd built, ELM Strategies, and how we helped companies lead with empathy, integrity, and smart systems. But the subtext was clear to anyone who knew the story. You don't underestimate a woman who has already rebuilt herself once. Clients poured in. My first hire was a woman from my support group, a fellow amputee who'd lost her job after her accident. Now, she was running operations. She told me every day she felt seen. I told her I knew the feeling, and then I bought a car. Not just any car, a sleek charcoal black coupe with custom leather and a V6 engine that purred like revenge. I didn't buy it to flex. I bought it because I could. Because the woman he mocked for driving a basic sedan was now being asked to keynote conferences and advise Fortune 500 teams. Because soft had never meant weak, and because I deserved a car that moved like I did, quiet, powerful, unapologetically fast. One of my new clients asked over coffee, "What's your leadership style?" I smiled, decisive, discreet, and highly efficient. She laughed. "So, the opposite of my ex." We clinked mugs like a toast, to growth, to clarity, to not needing closure. Because sometimes the cleanest break isn't about walking away, it's about accelerating forward while they disappear in the rear view. The ballroom shimmered in soft gold, the kind of light that made everything look earned. Staff bustled with trays of champagne, a string quartet played in the corner, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline like a crown. 1 year. That's how long it had been since I walked out of the life where I was someone's joke. Now, I stood at the center of a thriving consulting firm, surrounded by a team that respected me, clients who listened, and a world I had built entirely on my terms. We were celebrating the 1-year anniversary of ELM strategies, and the guest list read like a who's who of business leaders, advocates, and survivors turned thrivers. As the music faded and glasses clinked in anticipation, I stepped onto the small stage, lifted a flute of champagne, and looked out at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said, voice steady, clear. When this company began, it was born out of necessity, out of survival. But over the past year, it's grown into something else entirely. I paused, scanning the faces of my team, women, men, young professionals, people who knew what it meant to start over. This is for every woman who was told she was too emotional, too complicated, too damaged, too soft, too much. I smiled. Here's to every woman who was underestimated and upgraded herself. The room erupted in applause, not the kind people give out of politeness, but the kind that comes from deep, collective knowing. Later, after the last toast and the final laugh, I slipped away from the party and into the cool evening air. The city buzzed behind me, but the quiet of the park nearby called louder. I jogged the familiar trail, my blade legs slicing clean across the gravel, steady and strong. The night air wrapped around me like freedom, not just movement, but momentum. Halfway down the path, a little girl on a scooter spotted me. She paused, eyes wide, taking in the rhythmic stride of my run and the gleam of carbon fiber under moonlight. "You're like a superhero," she said, awe in her voice. I slowed, smiled, and tapped my leg with 2 fingers. Something like that. Then I ran on, faster now. Because the thing they never tell you about starting over? Once you do it on your own terms, you never look back. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.